Hello, I'm Annette. Welcome to my podcast in English number 5. Today I'm going to talk about a lovely French wool show and about two similar but very different yarns. If you don't know me, my name is Annette Petavy. I'm a Swedish crochet designer living just outside Lyon in France. So that's why my English is a bit funny. I'm also a slightly sick person today. That's why my break was a bit longer than usual. I got a bad cold. Currently, I have bronchitis. I have bronchitis every winter. It lasts forever. So what I'm going to do is simply to cut out my coughing. So if the pictures is a bit jumpy and there are cuts, it's just because I think that's perhaps not very nice, but nicer than hearing me cough. Okay, so let's not think about that too much, but start today's topics. And as I said, I wanted to talk to you about a lovely French wool show. It's not exclusively dedicated to yarn, and I will tell you a bit more about that in detail. This wool show is called Les Journées Nationales de la Laine, so the National Wool Days. And it takes place every year on the last weekend of October. That's also the weekend when we change hour here. We go back from summertime to wintertime here in France. So it's always a bit tricky on the Sunday morning to know exactly if you are on time or not. But now we start to manage that quite well. It's the third year I'm going to this show. It takes place in a very small, no, not very small, but smallish village or very small town called Felton. Felton, a lot of French people don't know where Felton is, so if you don't, no problem. It's in the center of France, in a département, so a small region called La Creuse. In Felton, I checked there are about, normally there are about 1,700 people living there. And during the weekend of the National Wool Days this year, they estimated it to be around 15,000 visitors. So if you want to stay in Felton in the village, book your accommodation a year in advance. That's my advice. But if you will need a car to get there anyhow, so if you can drive for 15-20 minutes, people I know found accommodation like a week before, so it's totally possible. And this show, up until just a few years ago, it has been running now for around 20 years, I think, perhaps 18. This was maybe the 18th edition. But up until a couple of years ago, it was a rather small show. And it was a very woolly show. So to get in, because you have to apply and be accepted, and it's still like that, of course. Well, either you had your own sheep flock, or you spun your own yarn, or you did felting. Felting is still very important, both in this annual show and in a special show about only felting that takes place in the same village every second year in spring. So it had to be very sheepy, woolly, very natural, rustic. Otherwise, you did not get in. And it was exclusively 100% wool. I have a friend who has worked in textiles for years. She's used to do embroidery and dyed her own materials from embroidery and catered to embroideries. Then she worked with knitting yarns for years. And she's also a very knowledgeable person in the area of silk. She consults with farmers worldwide about breeding silkworms, and of course her yarns were in silk or a blend of wool and silk. And when she applied, this was several years ago now, but when she applied to the show, her application was rejected because she had a silk profile and not a wool profile. But that has changed a lot now in this past few years. The number of vendors has grown because the local tennis club has agreed to cancel Saturday afternoon practice once a year. So this is in the sports center of this village that this takes place. So now there's more space and more vendors and a much more open policy. And I think it's a very, very good thing, because this has made this show a very diverse one, where people travel from afar just to go there. And it's still a very authentic feeling show. I say it smells of sheep, and it actually smells even more of alpacas, because there are live alpacas at the entry. One of the halls, there are two halls that they're very close together. Last year it was well, I'm not an alpaca breeder, so please forgive my lack of terminology, but an alpaca mum with her alpaca baby. And alpacas are flock animals, I know this much. And I had already seen alpacas in shows when there are not very many of them. They make this kind of noise sound, and to me, who is not a professional in alpacas, it sounds like the alpaca is crying. And last year the mom alpaca was crying, and one of my friends who is an alpaca breeder said that it was because she felt alone and isolated from her flock, because her baby was too young to be for her to see him as a companion. This year there were 4 alpacas, so no crying or whatever this sound is, no looking for the rest of the flock. They were beautiful, different colors, and alpacas are just so cute. And a little bit smelly, but that's nice. And as I said, this show has grown. I don't know if I told you, but now there's around 140 vendors, all very different. So there's something for everyone. If you're interested in felting and rustic wool, there's definitely something there for you. If you want to have a view of the indie dyes scene in France, there were quite a few indie dyes there this year. There are people who spin, who felt, who knit, who weave, who crochet, and then there are people like me who sell yarn and patterns and so on. I go there with 2 of my friends from Lyon. One of them is an indie dyer, and the other one is a crochet artist. And I will try to make a small kind of slideshow at the end of the podcast with photos where you can see their work as well. So why this huge event in this very small village in a region in France where, as I said, you have to go by car, there are no major train lines, no major bus lines. Why there? Well, Felton is very close to Aubusson, and if you are at all into tapestry weaving, you might have heard of Aubusson, because this area is actually a center for tapestry weaving, carpet weaving, rug weaving, and it has been so since the 14th century. So it's a very, very long tradition, and for all these types of weaving, of course, you use wool. It best to say that tapestry and carpet and rug weaving are still very living activities in this area. There are museums, of course, but there is a school in Aubusson for tapestry weaving, and in Felton there is a manufacturer called Atelier Panton, who weaves tapestries, carpets and rugs. So of course, to do this you need wool. You need, so there's a small mill in Felton, La Filature Terrade, that also does very specific dyeing. They dye for tapestry weaving in small quantities. They have vats that go from I don't know if the biggest one is 10 or 20 kilos of yarn, or 50. Most mills, the smallest vat is 10. I visited them a couple of years ago. I think they have a 50 kilo vat and a couple of 20 and 10. But they also have 5 kilowatts and a 1 kilo vat, a couple of them, where they do custom dyeing for tapestry weaving. And you know, these tapestries are like paintings, so there are many shades of color going into them. It has to be a very precise dyeing. And when I visited the mill, dyeing was ongoing, and the dyers have fantastic skills. They are actually just standing there with their primary colors in dye solution and pouring into the vat until they get the right shade compared to the sample they have. So I have used this to my advantage because I have my London yarn dyed in Felton by Terrade. I have 1 or 2 colors that are from their shade card, but otherwise I send a sample and they dye it to the precise color that I've selected, and that's just so amazing. So that is why wool and Felton goes together. Also, as you might have understood, I will strongly advise you to put a visit to Felton during the National Wool Days on your bucket list. And one of the reasons that contributes to this is the fantastic yarn bombing in the village. This started a few years ago, and currently, I don't know for how long this has been like this, but actually the town or the tourist center has, I don't think she works full time, but they employ a stylist who works on the yarn bombing. And they keep the pieces from one year to the other, but every year they add to them. And when I went there for the first time, I was only a visitor at the show, and I and my friend went to sit and knit and crochet in the Grand Café de Felton, which is the cafe in the center of the village. And we actually met a few ladies there who were working on next year's yarn bombing, because they work all year round on the yarn bombing for the following year under the supervision of the stylist. In the photos at the end, that I will try to put in at the end, the yarn bombing photos I have are from 2 years ago, because this time I was a vendor, so I didn't get to visit the village hardly. I just took the time because it was very, very busy. It's wonderful when you're a vendor to be very, very busy, but it's not very conducive to photos. So on Sunday I rapidly ran around the hall where I was and snapped a few pictures, and I put them in the end so that you can get a feel for the show, and also add the pictures from 2 years ago of that year's yarn bombing. Every year, as I say, they keep the pieces from the year before. Sometimes they install them in the same place. Sometimes they move them and make another installation. And they add every year. So it's fantastic. It's just has to be seen. So yes, this was my third year. The first year I was a visitor, as I said. Last year I had a booth, and this year too. And even compared to last year, I felt that the public is changing a bit, because this used to be the wool mecca where only hardcore rustic wool lovers went. Now it's still everyone in this, every visitor is passionate about yarn and wool, and it's so wonderful. You hardly have anyone just walking around. Well, perhaps people from the village that just take a tour of the site to see, to have a look what's happening, but most people are totally passionate, and they travel from afar, from all over France and beyond. I had some Dutch people in my booth. I had some English people, and of course people from all over France. And I noted, and other vendors noted, that there was an evolution compared to last year, even just, with 1 year in hindsight. It was a slightly younger crowd, more people coming from Paris. And of course, the biggest yarn shows in France are in Paris. But people came from Paris. I think were quite happy, because it's a very different event compared to the big events in Paris. Even if it's a large event, it's still very human, and the environment is you're close to the nature, you're close to a true village. It's very different. The vibe is completely different. And I think it's very good that the younger knitters and the wool lovers find this event and want to come there, because it ensures that it will continue to evolve and become more and more interesting. And of course, you should go too. But if you go next year, I think I won't be there, because next year in October, I'm participating as just a student in the Misty Retreat in Cardiff in Wales. And I think it's just the week before, and it won't be possible for me to attend Felton. But I hope that he will want to take me back the year after that, because it's a wonderful show. And and everyone should go. Today I am definitely a tea drinking podcaster, and I feel that I will have to go a bit faster in the rest what I wanted to say, because my voice is not keeping up at all. But I still wanted to talk to you about the differences between these two yarns that look very much alike. This one is currently on my English language website, which needs an overhaul. I know that. I'm going to work on it. It's my DK weight merino. And this one is a yarn that I haven't put up there yet, but it's on the French side. I have called it Kiruna, after the northernmost village in Sweden. It's also a DK weight yarn. Both of these yarns have a meterage of 112 meters per 50 grams. They both knit up, because let's say that stockinette knit swatches are quite a good standard to compare yarns and what they're suitable for. They both knit up at a gauge of approximately 20 stitches per 10 centimeters. They're light grey, as you can see. They come from the same mill. So this one is 100% superwash merino, and this one is a GOTS certified blend of 70% organic wool and 30% alpaca. This is a superwash yarn. So what is a superwash yarn? I think you know that a wash yarn is a yarn that can be washed in a washing machine on a wool cycle. Not on your normal cycle, but on a wool cycle that's gentler with the yarn. And why is that so? In wool, as for human hair, the individual fiber is covered with scales, you know, like not exactly like fish scales because they don't necessarily overlap in the same way. But when I was younger, you had a lot of ads about hair conditioners when you saw that kind of microscope picture of an individual hair, and you could see that there were scales on the hair, and the hair conditioner smoothed down these scales so the hair didn't tangle as much. In the superwash yarn, the scales are actually removed from the individual wool fiber. So this means that the different fibers can catch on each other like they can do in untreated wool, and they won't felt. So felting in wool occurs with change in temperature and with mechanical, by working on the wool mechanically. You can rub it, you can, the most effective way. You can needle felt it too, where you use a needle with barbs. Mechanical work on the yarn and difference in temperature may cause wool to felt, will cause natural wool to felt. Superwash, no, because the scales have been removed. Of course, this is a chemical process, so it's a kind of process that can be a bit harsh on the yarn and sometimes on the environment. The result is, in superwash merino, it's a super soft wool. Honestly, this is something you can put directly on any skin, except for wool allergy perhaps, but in terms of sensitivity, this is a wonderful material. It's almost like butter, it's so soft. However, superwash does not only mean that the yarn is super soft. Not all superwash yarns are, but it can. A merino superwash yarn is generally very soft. It also affects the properties of yarn in a different way. The yarn loses some of its elasticity, so it can stretch out a lot. So if you make a garment in superwash merino, it can stretch out over time. I have had this experience with this one, treating it a bit harshly by putting it in the dryer for some time worked for me. But this is something you need to know. This yarn, 70% wool, 30% alpaca, is not superwash. It's a very soft yarn still. I can put it like this, but perhaps if I was going to wear it, I have very, very sensitive skin. If I was going to wear it all day, right around my neck, close to my neck, after a while, I might find it slightly prickly. If you have normal skin, that's not a problem. This is not superwash, so you cannot wash it in the washing machine without risking felting. So why do I have two very similar yarns in the shop? Well, because I wanted one alternative that's ultra soft, that's very suitable for accessories to be worn right next to the skin, for child's items, because the items are smaller, they will not weigh as much, and the weight of the work will not stretch the yarn as much. I also wanted an organic alternative, more natural, and also more suitable for garments, because this wool alpaca blend, despite 30% of alpaca that can cause stretch, but it's the wool is the major part of this yarn, and this yarn will hold up much better to wear in a garment or in a very large shawl that can be heavy and might stretch out too much in a superwash yarn. So there's more to yarn than you'd think. And I just wanted to discuss this with you because I think it's fascinating and so interesting, and I hope you thought so too. So that's about it for today. Just to say what I'm wearing, it's the shawl Victoria, which is a small crescent shawl designed by Eclat du Soleil, worked from the top down with a nice shell pattern and a border. Some of you may already have made it because it's not a new pattern at all. The yarn I used to carry and worked it up in does no longer exist, but the pattern is perfectly suitable for today's yarns and today's wearers. On the mannequin behind me, my own pattern, Lina, a simple stow, but funny to make with the zigzags that are in thin air. Not a new pattern at all, but still nice and interesting to make. I think I need to do something new with this idea. We'll see about that. If you want to follow me, you can subscribe to my newsletter. I put a link below the video. My website is annettepetavy.com. You can access the English part of the website by clicking the EN button on the top right corner. The English website needs an overhaul. It's coming this winter after all the shows are finished. I also have a Ravelry group. If you want to join me there, it's Annette Petavy Design. Have a wonderful day or evening whenever you watch this, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye bye. you.